Hello all, welcome to a session on quantitative comparison for GRE. So in the GRE exam, as you know, quantitative reasoning is one of the three areas. Within quantitative reasoning, each section has 20 questions. 8 of them usually are of the type of quantitative comparison. So this would become a very high value learning. So let's first understand how the question looks. In the GRE, the quantitative comparison question is usually in the beginning of the quantitative reasoning section. The first 8 questions, 1 to 8 in each section of quantitative reasoning, are usually of this type. In this question type, you need to remember 4 major areas. This top part here is where information is given. Then you have two quantities, quantity A and quantity B. This particular question is about understanding which of the two quantities is bigger. In all of these questions, the options are always fixed. They are in the bottom and these 4 will always appear in the same order, no change. If quantity A is larger than quantity B, you will mark option 1. If quantity B is larger than quantity A, you will mark option 2. If both of them are always equal, you will mark option 3. And if the relationship cannot be determined, you will mark option 4. Depending on the information given here and what is present in the two quantities, you will end up with one of these 4 scenarios. There is no 5th scenario which is actually possible. This, friends, is how the question appears in the exam. Now, how can we solve it? Let's understand a few of these techniques. The first technique that you need to remember, the first thing that you need to keep in mind is that these options are never going to change. So going and trying to read the options inside the examination hall might not be a good idea at all. If I look at the strategies, the topmost strategies that we are looking at are 1. The subtraction strategy, the division strategy, the plug-in strategy, substitution, making use of the quantities themselves, and finally the calculator way. So 6 major strategies are what we're going to focus for the next 45 minutes on. So let's get started with the first strategy. Let's understand what does this subtraction strategy mean. Here is an example question. There are two quantities here, quantity A and quantity B. You notice that nothing extra has been given beyond this. Quantity A is A plus B whole square. Quantity B is A square plus B square. Which of them is bigger? When you expand quantity A, you get this as A square plus 2AB plus B square. You would also notice that this A square and B square here and the terms here are also very similar. That should tell you that I should be using the subtraction strategy. If the terms in both the quantities are almost the same with only small difference, when I subtract them, many of these things will get cancelled. So what would be the value of quantity A minus quantity B? This would be, if you notice, A square get cancelled, B square and B square get cancelled. You will say this is 2AB. Is this term 2AB positive or negative? That's the next question to ask. Why is it so important? If A minus B is greater than 0, I can directly say A is greater than B, that is option 1. If A minus B is less than 0, that will tell me that A is less than B or B is a greater one. I can go with option 2. If A minus B is equal to 0, I can say A is equal to B. I will mark option 3. If I don't know whether a minus b is positive or negative, I will mark option 4. So whenever you're looking at a subtraction method, analogously you are looking at what is a minus b, is it positive or negative? That is your decision making point. So here we got a minus b is equal to this 2ab. Quantity a minus quantity b is equal to 2ab. Is 2ab positive or negative depends on whether ab is positive or negative, which in turn would depend on the values of a and b. If then you look at what is given in the block above the two quantities. In this case, this block is empty. Can this happen in the GRE exam? Of course, yes. There are quite a few occasions where the block could be empty. If the block is empty, it means they don't want to tell you anything about the small a and small b. You need to figure out for yourself. The instructions of the GRE says, if you find a variable and nothing is mentioned about it, it means that it's a real number, capital R. So thankfully, that's one small piece of information that we could somehow manage to get. Nothing beyond. Based on this data, can I tell whether AB is positive? I don't know. If A equal to 1 and B equal to 1, of course it can be positive. Is it possible for it to be negative? Yes. If one of them is positive, let's look at the values of A and B. If A is 1 and B is 1, AB would be equal to 1, so it is greater than 0. But if A is equal to 1 and B equal to minus 1, AB would be equal to minus 1. This is less than 0. So what do you know about AB? Is it positive or negative? You will say it's sometimes positive, sometimes negative. It depends. Then you would say the relationship cannot be determined and you will mark option 4 as the answer. So what are the key steps again? When should you subtract? If by subtracting you can cancel some terms, you will subtract. What do you achieve by subtracting? If I can decide whether the resulting quantity is positive or negative or equal to 0, I can conclude. If it can be sometimes positive and sometimes negative or sometimes 0, you can say the answer cannot be determined. That is good enough for us to get marks in the exam. Let us take one more example to strengthen this method further. So here is one more question which is again based on subtraction strategy. Here as Quantitative we are giving you this idea. In the main exam there is an idea that you need to pick up. In this particular question, why should you subtract? The two quantities are looking almost unrelated. But if I subtract, I am going to get a quadratic expression where greater than 0, less than 0, I might be able to make some sense of it. So let us go ahead and find out what is a minus b. This would be equal to a square minus 2a plus 2. This is a quadratic expression. But beyond that, I can also write this as a square minus 2a plus 1 plus extra 1. So this would be a minus 1 whole square plus extra 1. This is perfect square plus 1. We already know that in the GRE exam we are only dealing with real numbers. So even if they do not tell you, you know that a is a real number. A belongs to R. So if a is already a real number, a minus 1, whether it's positive or negative, you know, a minus 1 whole square is always greater than or equal to 0 because a perfect square is always greater than or equal to 0. We also call this non-negative. We can't say it is positive because 0 cannot be called as positive, but we call it non-negative. When I add extra 1 to it, you know that a minus b is greater than or equal to 1. Is that positive? Of course it is positive. If it is greater than or equal to 0, you can't be so sure. But if it is greater than or equal to 1, you can be fully sure. So with this, we can conclude that a minus b is positive or a is greater than b directly. So you will mark the answer as option 1. This is an example of using the subtraction strategy to get our answer.